Free your mind now. Be part of People's Pan-African Parliament, the Pan-African Pyramid Debate with your speaker, Andrew Irumba Katusabe.
Welcome aboard. Welcome to another edition of the Pan-African Pyramid Show here at Fairway Hotel in Kampala, Uganda. Every Friday from 5 to 8 p.m. is the People's Parliament, the Pan-African Pyramid Debate. Your speaker is Andrew Irumba Katusabe. Sankara is a name I got from Burkina Faso when I traveled, so you will call me Andrew Irumba Katusabe Sankara. This show runs on NBS television every Saturday from 4 to 5 p.m. with our partner sponsors, the Next Media Services and the Spy Uganda. Ladies and gentlemen, and fellow Pan-Africans, we gather here to examine Uganda's military engagements beyond its borders, specifically the Democratic Republic of Congo, Somalia, and South Sudan. Are these interventions a true reflection of Pan-African solidarity and responsibility for continental peace and security, or do they mirror patterns of neo-imperialist ambition where national interest and power projection drive foreign military actions? This debate invites us to engage with the heart of Pan-Africanism. Are we witnessing a genuine effort to uphold peace and stability across Africa as a family of nations? Or is Uganda's military presence an assertion of dominance over weaker states under the gaze of regional leadership? Let us interrogate these complex realities not to divide but to deepen our understanding of Africa's path towards unity, peace, and sovereignty. Ladies and gentlemen, Uganda is stepping up as a responsible regional power, answering the call for African solutions to African problems. Interventions are aligned with the African Union's peacekeeping mandates and the spirit of collective security. In Somalia, Uganda's troops have helped curb extremist groups like Al-Shabaab, contributing to regional stability under AMISOM and ATMIS. In South Sudan, Uganda's military presence has safeguarded key infrastructure and prevented escalation during civil war crises. And as we speak right now, last week but one, actually a group of UPDF landed in South Sudan to create peace in that now war-torn area, part of Africa. Uganda's involvement in the DRC has focused on neutralizing armed rebel groups like the ADF NALU that threaten not only Ugandan but national stability. Instability in neighboring states inevitably spills over. Uganda is protecting itself and the region by addressing insecurity at its source. Uganda's interventions in the DRC, especially in resource-rich areas, have coincided with the reports of illegal exploitation of minerals, referred to past UN reports on Uganda's role in DRC's conflict economy. Military presence secures economic interests under the gaze of peacekeeping. Uganda's military actions reflect a bid for regional hegemony, extending its influence in politically fragile neighboring states like DRC. This echoes colonial patterns where military powers is used to control and extract rather than empower. Uganda's unilateral interventions, especially in South Sudan and DRC, have sometimes bypassed regional and international consensus, raising questions about the motives. There have been allegations of human rights abuses by Ugandan forces, undermining the legitimacy of their presence and raising questions about their accountability. Today's debate, ladies and gentlemen, forces us to grapple with an enduring question. Can military intervention ever be truly altruistic in the African context, or will it always reflect an undercurrent of self-interest? Uganda's actions in the DRC, Somalia, and South Sudan sit at the crossroads of Pan-African ideals and real politics. Our challenge is to discern whether these actions strengthen the bonds of African solidarity or undermine them through power imbalances. Ladies and gentlemen, let's discuss this squarely. I will begin with Comrade Dan Rugarama, who is the chairman the Pan-African Movement Uganda chapter, and is also very much in the comfort of Comrade Lesaffre Thomas, aka Rutatina, a freelance journalist from France, but also a member of the Pan-African Pyramid, especially belonging to the research desk of the Pan-African Pyramid. I'm glad to have you two here right in Kampala to discuss this topic. I'll begin with you, Comrade Daniel Bugarama, my elder.
The question is as interesting, but at the same time as troubling as it stands. In the book by Parkinson, a former CIA agent at a very high rank, titled The Tales of the Economic Hitman, points it out clearly that in the lesser advantaged countries in South America, in Eastern Europe, and on the African continent, the conceptual West, and especially America and Western Europe, develop a habit of creating agents. And those agents can even be in form of presidents and higher government officers who, in actual sense, do the bidding of the conceptual West in terms of economic and political interests. In that respect, therefore, Mr. Speaker, sir, when the question brings out the element of agents of power influence, I do subscribe to the notion that indeed we have got such agents because they are well elaborated in numerous high-level literature that has been authored by worthy comrades that we cannot ignore. Mr. Speaker, sir, in the book, again, by Naomi Chomsky, that Jewish American, who, by all standards, is one of the best international global strategic professors, we have where he observes that the conceptual West will always create war where there is no war. On the African continent and elsewhere, it is on record that Europe, especially Western Europe and America, have sponsored wars, and they are still sponsoring wars. They have carried out a number of assassinations on the African continent, countless assassinations. In that respect, Mr. Speaker, sir, when we talk about agents of power, influence, and we talk about guardians of peace, then I think now Chomsky is very instructive in bringing it out that indeed we have got the promoters of peace at the same time who are also promoters of chaos, and in that respect, therefore, again, when you closely check the book titled Conspiracy of the 100, in the book Conspiracy of the 100, he observes, the author, that peace is not a given, that peace is fought for and won, and it has got to be protected by all means. That's why, therefore, the guardians of peace are those ones with the power and the ability to make sure that peace reigns. And where they want to promote chaos, they also design, like they have designed instability in DRC, they have designed instability in Southern Sudan, in Somalia. The conflicts we see in the majority of the African continent and in Asia is as a consequence of the guardians and guarantors of peace who are not yet interested in seeing peace, and they would want as much as possible to make sure that they hold on to the concept of superiority complex, which they have been exercising over a number of years. Mr. Speaker, it is on record, therefore, that Uganda under NRM came as a consequence of a revolution. In that respect, the leaders that we had from 86, 85, 86, up to now, in the name of the President of the Republic of Uganda, have got two things, dimensions, that he is a patriot, but at the same time he is a Pan-African. And that one is going to lead us as to why, for instance, we have had him and the UPDF extend their patriotic and Pan-African credentials in other fragile, rather fragile armies and political leaderships which are not as yet organized as they should be.
Comrade, when you talk about, when you project the Uganda's leader as a Pan-African, and therefore his actions across the region, you want us to carry them as Pan-African in nature, other people contend that actually they're using Pan-Africanism as a platform, but the actions they're doing on that platform are actually different from speaking to Pan-Africanism, ideal and aspirations. They always give an example. People who came on the Pan-African platform and did contrary to what Pan-Africans actually lectured about. So even right here, you know the history of UPDF act in Congo, that up right now, we are paying money in billions of US dollars because of the misbehaviors or the misdeeds of UPDF in Congo. So can that be an act of a Pan-African? Or you are going there to loot?
Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to be on the record.
And by the way, before you go far, you have also had, just of recent, some soldiers from South Africa. Some of them have been killed from there. Some of them were repatriated back. Some people have been actually contemplating whether they were there on a Pan-African mission or on a personal arrangement. Because some people think the interest that took them there are interests of a particular individual.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, sir. I said I want to be on the record that whenever there is an engagement, there will always be losses. And sometimes some engagements also produce what we call a cost. Some of these costs include lives. It is regrettable that we had our brothers and sisters from South Africa who died in Kivu, north and south of it, because of those engagements. But if I go into that, Mr. Speaker, sir, it would have digressed, and I will take a lot of time because I want to believe that South Africa, on the invitation of President Tshisekedi, was also protecting certain interests. Probably the M23 who are rumored.
That's what they want us to interrogate, Comrade Rugarama Elder. Those interests, were they Pan-African in nature, or these are individual self-seeking interests?
By the time I conclude, Mr. Speaker, sir, we would have discovered as to whether...
Or you are fearing to speak your mind because we have a guest from there.
Mr. Speaker, sir, by the time I conclude, we would have agreed, at least my presentation will enable the viewers to analyze as to whether some of these interventions, military and otherwise, are actually Pan-African in nature, because we cannot choose, for instance, Munich and MONUSCO deployments of the UN, because we know for them they are not Pan-African at all, and their interests are somewhere else. But on the part of the African consortium deployments, I will submit respectfully that majority of the deployments, including UPDF, is actually a Pan-African gesture. It only becomes very unfortunate, like you pointed out, Mr. Speaker, sir, that the imperialists, in wanting to justify that they are powerful and superior, they will take you to their own courts, when actually what happened was just a brotherly fight. They will expose you as a rogue, and they will also want you to be seen by imposing fines and payments like Uganda is doing. And I can assure you that members should not be deceived into some of the acts of the so-called justice from the imperialists and neo-colonialists. The truth of the matter is that that is done to weaken you, to weaken your engagements as the people from the same continent, such that they are seen as the only people who can manage the situations, whether those situations are even in your backyard. It is therefore my submission, Mr. Speaker, sir, that that element where the international, so-called international community, we know who the international community is, go into their own courts, which they call international courts, and then they prosecute people whom they know shouldn't even be there, is nonsensical and must stop, because the real culprits who should be tried in those courts actually don't go there. And last time, when the prosecutor brought on board, indicted Netanyahu and his minister of defense, there was a lot of noise in the American parliament and other sectors, simply because they know, and they even threatened because the prosecutor was an American. So therefore, you can clearly see that some of these international courts and other forms of justices are not there to protect the interests of Africans. And in that respect, therefore, what happens in South Sudan, for instance, what happens in Somalia, the Americans are the ones who are destabilizing Somalia. We know the Straits of Gilbert is being destabilized. The entire Djibouti, if you go there, all the superpowers have got forces in Djibouti. That small country called Djibouti. Why are they there, and why do they have their interests? When you look at the waters in Somalia, who is patrolling the waters in Somalia? And when the deployment by the African Union sanctioned, it is a pity that we don't have a standing force. The African Union does not have a standby force. If they had, that would be a different matter. And somebody is working day and night to make sure, although we have got a department at African Union called Peace and Security, we cannot come to find a standby force. And that is very, very, very bad. It has led to all these problems you see. Because one can argue, you go to Cameroon, South Cameroon is not part of the Cameroon, in a manner of speaking. Central African Republic, Southern Sudan, Democratic Republic of Congo, Somalia, I can go on and on and on. Africa is troubled, and when we have got people like His Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni making deployments, whether it is on the invitation of a president in that country, whether it is being sanctioned by, for instance, the African Union, whether it is a deployment sanctioned by, say, for instance, the East African Standby Force, as we saw in DRC, it is a welcome idea and it is a Pan-African gesture. Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to go on and submit that our neighbors, when you have got a neighbor who has got a fragile state, because fragile army rather, and we know that, for instance, in countries like Somalia, in countries like the Democratic Republic of Congo, in countries like Central African Republic, fragile armies is one of the problems that beset Africa. It was pointed out by His Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni in a paper presented in Pretoria, in Durban, in 2010, where he was looking at the bottlenecks of Africa. And one of the items he pointed out was weak armies. We have got a problem of weak armies, and as a consequence, we have got fragile states. And when you have got fragile states where rebel activities flourish and they are your neighbors, you know anytime you will get a spillover. It is therefore a correct decision by a country which is disciplined, has got a disciplined army, to organize itself and send help. Otherwise, fire which starts from a neighbor is most likely to come to you as well. Mr. Speaker, DRC, in a book, once again, by our senior brother Chinua Achebe, he wants to diagnose the problem of Africa. And he submits that the problem of Africa, which can as well be put to the entire Africa, it's not just the problem of Nigeria, because his book is about the problem of Nigeria, which he underscores as leadership. I want to submit to us that the problem of Africa, therefore, is leadership. And when the political leadership question is not solved, you get the rest of the issues on the continent and in specific countries wrong. It is therefore in that regard that we try as much as possible when we make deployments, for instance, in Somalia, solve the political question. And by first stabilizing the country militarily, then you solve the political question, you will get the country in order. Rwanda was almost at the point of a failed state in the aftermath of genocide. When militarily they came alive, it is now a stable and prosperous country. We hope in those subsequent deployments that some of our countries and neighbors like Somalia, Southern Sudan, and DRC will solve the political question when they are militarily stable, and the other issues like economic and other related ones will also be sorted. Mr. Speaker, the DRC, Somalia, Southern Sudan have suffered and they are still suffering, of course, like I said, from, again, what Commander President Yoweri Museveni of Uganda pointed out in the same paper that he presented in South Africa, and that was the bottlenecks, what he pointed out as the 11 bottlenecks that beset Africa. And he pointed out inter alia the ideological bankruptcy. Ideological bankruptcy, when you look at those countries that we are talking about, for instance, why is there trouble in Somalia? People look at themselves as being different on account of tribe. Religion, majority of them are Muslims. But simply tribe. And you know who emphasizes the differences in tribe is also known. The imperialism is at work. When you go to Southern Sudan, what is the problem? The Nuer and the Dinka look at themselves as being different. Although if they entered here, I would not be able to tell the difference. But they make sure that Rachamachar and our senior brother Salva Kiir, they represent interests of their tribes, and it is very unfortunate that on that account they cannot see eye to eye, and they end up breaking the country in two pieces, and that is what we call ideological bankruptcy. And Mr. Speaker, sir, whoever, if it is UPDF, for instance, after militarily stabilizing DRC, if there is that arrangement, then they can go into civic sensitization. Civic sensitization, where the entire Somalia, the entire Southern Sudan, and DRC is going to realize that they are actually the same, and the enemy is not the next tribe, but the enemy is elsewhere. That is when we are going to solve the political question and get the development on the table and move it forward. Mr. Speaker, towards my conclusion,
Yeah.
I want to categorically state that imperialism is certainly well and alive, and hence conceptual ways to recruit us to enable, to entrench neocolonialism. The white man in a film where Tombi is named Tombi, but in actual sense it is his Kinta Kunte. He insists that he is actually Kinta Kunte. In that film, the Kinta Kunte runs and goes back to a camp which was training the Africans, because they had cited the imperialists, they had cited the colonialists who were actually taking them as slaves. And he says, when he falls down, I have seen a white man. They all got paralyzed, and the trainer of that camp looks at them as if he is studying them, looks at the members of his camp, and he asks them, have you heard what Kinta Kunte has said? He goes ahead to say, the white man is here. I want to state therefore, Mr. Speaker, that the white man, although he claims to have left during the fight for independence, never left. The white man is actually here. We need to be aware on how not to fight him, but how to work with him to our advantage. Mr. Speaker, sir, Uganda's Pan-Africanism sends her to Somalia, to Southern Sudan, to DRC. I want to state and be on record that
Pan-Africanism or selfishness?
Uganda does not have capacity, for instance, to exploit DRC. Uganda does not have capacity to exploit Southern Sudan. Those capacities, if you landed, for instance, in DRC, and you saw who is cutting down the logs, you saw who is who is doing the mining. It is not the Ugandan companies, because those ones don't have capacity. We confuse some of these things. They are going, for instance, to take Uganda in the international court. They are going to waste a lot of money making submissions and arguments. They are going to say, Uganda, you have been caught in the act. But that is just to hoodwink us. The truth of the matter is, when you look at who has the capacity to exploit some of these countries, it cannot be Uganda, it cannot be Rwanda, it cannot be any of us here on the African continent. The person with the capacity, whether he recruits, because there is the element of agency, whether he recruits some of the Ugandan people and other people from the African continent, the principal person exploiting the resources of Southern Sudan, resources of who is fishing in the waters of Somalia, who is there patrolling with military ships. Is it Uganda? No. Who is because there is oil under the sea. Who is monitoring it and who is creating that confusion in Somalia? It is not Uganda. You remember that the Dr. late, may his soul rest in eternal peace, Dr. Garanga, John
Garanga,
didn't want Sudan to be divided. The problem of Sudan, the entire Sudan, is even not the tribe is not even the size. The problem of Sudan, even if you further subdivided it, if you do not solve the problem of ideological bankruptcy, if you do not solve the problem of people looking at themselves as being different, whereas they are not, you will all continue subdividing yourselves until you become villages. Mr. Speaker, I want to conclude that, therefore,
But before you conclude, let's go back on let's revisit this matter of Uganda and DRC. You are sometimes you are committing your own mistakes, and then you want to put it on the white man, America. Uganda is paying billions of money for having lost a case at the international court that they were plundering Congo minerals. So are you saying they did not? It's a lie?
I have said, and I'm going to repeat, Uganda does not have capacity to exploit in any manner the resources of DRC. The powers that have got capacity to exploit the resources of DRC, which they have been doing with the protection of the so-called United Nations forces and MONUC and MONUSCO, is America, is France, Western Europe generally speaking. They have got the machinery, they have got the technology to exploit, and they are still exploiting the helicopters and other planes which are flying in and out of DRC forests. The cutting of the rocks is being done by the Chinese. You can only blame Uganda if you want to blame them at all. For a few individuals, not even as a country, who are collaborators, and there are some of them are agents, just who pick commission, but they are not the ones who are directly exploiting DRC. When we win the masses by trying some Ugandans in the international court, and there is a verdict that they actually exploited, simply because maybe one is driving a Congolese vehicle here on the Kampala streets, and then you say that was exploitation. Let's look at the bigger picture. The bigger picture, dear comrades, ladies and gentlemen, is that the conceptual West is the enemy here. Uganda can only pick a vehicle, can only pick like maybe 2 kilograms of food.
Why are they picking a vehicle that is not theirs in the first place?
We are discussing a very serious topic and a bigger picture. We want to look at the big thieves. The smaller thieves, we shall handle them later. But the bigger thieves are the ones who must be handled seriously now as we talk. I want to submit also,
as you wind up, my brother.
as I wind up, that some of these deployments are not self-made. And I don't think Uganda, for instance, even the accusation that Rwanda is supporting M23 is debatable. But Uganda, which is our question today, has, for instance, under the mandate of African Union, gone to Somalia. So they are there under the mandate of African Union. Uganda was also in Central African Republic under the mandate, upon the request of the president of that country. We are in DRC under the invitation and a working relationship we have and the agreement with President Tshisekedi. That is also on the record. We were there when it was at the same time with Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda was not there, and that was East African Standby Force. Therefore, these deployments that we do as Uganda in different countries, we have been in Southern Sudan, and it was strictly under the invitation of Salva Kiir, the president. These deployments that we do are purely on the invitation of the people who are responsible. We do not invade other countries, because if it was true, it would be invasion. This thing of saying that the UPDF is being deployed without the knowledge of Parliament, that Parliament is supposed to make an input, that is what we call in-house management. We shall manage that. If that law is being broken, we shall manage it later, but let us first quell the fire. Finally, Mr. Speaker, sir, some of these indisciplined people, when we are having engagements, are simply isolated cases. For instance, when you look at the Porter's report, if you looked at the Porter's report in the DRC, he didn't claim that the government of Uganda was involved in plundering Congo. He pointed out individuals, and these individuals were not doing what they were doing in the name of our country. I want to submit, therefore, as I conclude.
Do you remember some of the names that were mentioned?
Yes, they mentioned Kahindo Tafire, for instance, you remember. They mentioned there was the late, I think, is it Jet or something like that. Then they mentioned a certain friend of ours in the Pan-African rank. I don't know what she took. They even have a copy of the report. And it is unfortunate that those people, especially now some few soldiers, claim that they were charging. In army, there is what we call charging. when an enemy is overpowered, you charge and you take what the enemy has. So they say they didn't steal, they just charged. But
They charged their batteries.
yes, but the
They
most
take
important
other people's
thing
batteries.
is that this is not something that the government does deliberately. It is something that is done by some of the indisciplined officers. And I want also to submit, therefore, as a way of concluding on this, that this question, which is talking about guardian of peace, the truth of the matter is that we have got self-appointed guardians of peace, and they are the ones who say there will be peace somewhere, there will not be peace somewhere.
Who are those?
We have got the American government. They showed you very clearly when they called Zelensky in the Oval Office, and they looked him in the face, and the President of America told him that you don't have guards. Immediately, he mentioned that he encouraged Putin to start bombarding, increasing the speed at which he's bombarding Ukraine. As we talk now, and the entire Europe, Mr. Speaker, it was very amazing that Europe, including Lesaffre's country, started complaining that how come Ukraine is in Europe and for us we are not being invited to partake in the discussions about our neighbor. That how can you be discussing with Russia and about Ukraine and you are not involving us? How people forget.
Actually,
Very quickly. When they partitioned Africa in 1884, 1885,
in Berlin Conference,
did they invite any African country to participate? Why are they complaining that some other powers are participating in how to partition and exploit the resources of Ukraine without their input? Good for them. God has a way of paying back, Mr. Speaker, sir.
But before you go, actually, I hear in the politics of America, they threatened Zelensky that we do not have guns so that he can loosen up on the contractual obligations of the oil, of the minerals that they wanted. He was still a bit hesitant to sign the contract. You know they want their minerals. America wants their minerals.
Very true. Very true.
Now, when Zelensky was still contemplating on whether he should sign the deal or not, that's when they called him and said, we don't have this. Why? So that he panics. When Russia begins, then here right now, he has even written a requesting to meet again and sign. He has now accepted to sign. That's what exactly Trump was looking for. Sign very fast so that we can protect you. But in protecting you against Putin, they have now full access to the minerals of their country.
That's how it works out.
Yeah.
And that's what
So
those are the
him.
guarantors of peace that you were talking about. The guarantors of peace are countries like America, and they have recruit agents. And these agents act as influencers, power influencers. So the power influencers you see in other parts of the world either are doing it on behalf of America, with a few exceptions which are under sanctions. If you see, for instance, Cuba, which refuses the influence an agency that America wanted to make them to be, they will be under sanctions.
Yeah.
Venezuela will be under sanctions because they don't want to work as agents and power influencers on behalf of some other people. When you look at countries like on the African continent, generally speaking, which have rejected the policies of IMF and World Bank, they will be under sanctions and their presidents are going to be assassinated, or the economies are going to be sabotaged. Therefore, when you look at the whole picture here of the question, you will find that what Uganda is trying to do, I repeat, is a Pan-African act that should be supported.
So
where we have got errors,
of peace.
we shall contain and correct them.
Thank you so much on that,
Speaker.
Comrade Daniel Garama.
Be part of People's Pan-African Parliament, the Pan-African Pyramid Debate with your speaker, Andrew Irumba Katusabe.
He is a freelance journalist from France, but working with the Pan-African Pyramid on the research desk. Comrade Thomas Lesaffre, we gave him a local name here called Mutatina, he who fears nothing. He speaks his mind. Comrade Mutatina is also a recipient of the Pan-African Pyramid Global Award, the cohort class of 2024. The next 20 minutes are yours, Comrade.
So no, the intervention of UPDF in Zaire at the time and in DRC today did not sort out the problem. It did not. Yet it doesn't mean that the UPDF should not be here today. the diplomats, the presidents, the people on the ground, those are the ones that have to solve the problem. But the army itself in DRC has not sorted out the problem, right? Let me continue. I have a list of how many countries UPDF have come or to bring peace, as we said, or for something else. Central African Republic. Who can tell me today that the Central African Republic is stable? We have here people in the audience that remember that the South Africans came to try to help the president at the time. They had to withdraw. It was a nightmare for South Africans to participate to the politics there and to try to help. Because it was, we're not going to go on the because, but what I'm trying to argue here is that foreign army are intervening in Central African Republic. At time, it was originally the French. Now the Russians are there protecting the president. Now the president is going to Moscow. At some point, it was South Africans under the presidency of Jacob Zuma that came to try to sort out the situation. It was not sorted. Central African Republic, the Ugandans went in order to catch the LRA leader, Kony. Still not caught.
Joseph Kony.
The LRA is still that side, right? So that means what? That means that the situation has not been sorted in Central African Republic. The situation has not been sorted in Democratic Republic of Congo. Now let's look at South Sudan. Let's look at South Sudan. I'm going to be honest here. For South Sudan, I have more questions than I have answers. This is the most recent, right, deployment. Commander-in-Chief has tweeted what, on Tuesday or Monday, that the UPDF were...
Commandos have entered South Sudan.
And
that was against... They did not get permission from the Ugandan parliament, but also the authorities in South Sudan denied that UPDF had actually entered South Sudan. The official spokesperson of the South Sudan government said they are not here. But the CDF of Uganda said the commandos have entered. And even they showed on his Twitter, he showed even a plane,
yes,
these guys disembarking.
Coming out. And I was wondering where was the plane from, by the way. Anyway, doing the research, I have to admit that I have more questions than I have answers on the situation in South Sudan. Because I believe that South Sudan was a creation of Eastern African powers, including Museveni's, in alliance with the United States. And we do know that Museveni were very close to the United States at that time. He's really way less close to them. Yet Uganda had an interest into the creation of South Sudan.
His point is that America created South Sudan in conjunction with President Museveni.
Exactly.
You remember, Comrade, you are my elder. You remember John Garang Dimabio? He died living where?
Kampala.
What was the problem?
Kampala plain.
No. What was the agenda of his coming here?
So we do know that Museveni has been really influential in the creation of South Sudan in making sure that Salva Kiir also rules. What do we know? That we like to say that it was more Americans because we believe Americans are powerful, but now that I stay in Uganda, I also understand Museveni is a really powerful leader. And I do believe that he can be highly influential in the creation and in the delivery of South Sudan.
I agree with you, he's a very powerful leader.
Very powerful leader.
But does that influence help the region stability?
That's the question now we're asking. We have said for Central African Republic, we said no.
When you say Irumba is a very powerful man, finish the statement. Is his power helping those around him?
As I said earlier, in the case of DRC, it is clear that it does not help. In the case of Central African Republic, it is clear that it has not helped. In the case, because those states are weak states, right? As you were saying, collapse state. No, what do you call them? Fragile state. And so because they're fragile, they need allies. Yeah. The Central African Republic is a creation of French imperialism. It makes zero sense. It makes zero sense. I'm sorry for the patriots of that country. They can be patriotic, but the borders make zero sense. It's the Ubangi River that you can cross and you're in DRC. The tribes are from both sides. So we know this border makes zero sense. This country on itself was made so the French continue to control the region. Only last year, only 4 or 5 years ago, the French lose power there, which means that they were ruling that country with puppets from 1960 to 2020-21. And so what did the new president did when he tried to kick out the French? He had to come with the Russians because he knew that the French would threaten him too much. So he had to find a new ally. Exactly like Tshisekedi.
Friends, you are talking your own brother. You are talking about your own brothers.
There's no brother of mine that are imperialist in Central African Republic. There is zero brother of mine that is an imperialist in Central African Republic. I don't know those people.
You're denying your brothers.
But it is clear. No, but it is clear. It is clear that because those states are fragile, because the colonial borders are all like made out of weakening those states. Remember, I know I'm going a bit far from the topic, but remember the French, when they wanted to exploit Africa, they didn't come with those small countries. It's only in 1956, few years before independence, 54 I think, few years before independence, that they transformed ROF and REF, which was Afrique Équatoriale Française, into 5 states.
That's Africa what?
Afrique Équatoriale Française. It was the name of all the French colonies. They were together because the French understood that if you want to exploit Africa, you have to do it in unity, not with those small states. And what did they do in 1954? What did they do? They started to create all the small states. Senegal, Togo, Central African Republic, and all those states that have got their independence. They have zero capacity to govern themselves, so they can only be the puppets of imperialists. And the puppets of France in Central African Republic were kicked out. But then they had to find new mentors. They have to find new leaders, and those were the Russians. And now you have a situation where Russian, French, before South Africans were there, you have a situation where foreign power think that they are called by the president. The president called us, so we come. But we come because the state is weak, we come because the borders are fake, we come because that all colonial entity that survived colonialism is a joke. And it's the same situation in DRC right now. Same situation in DRC. Those borders make zero sense, and they are the biggest part of the problem. And Tshisekedi cannot sort out the problem himself. That is the problem. He has to call South Africans, he has to call Kenyans, he has to call East Africans, he has to call SADC countries. He cannot alone sort out the problem. He called himself a Pan-African, but he called mercenaries from Romania, which, by the way, were organized by the French. Don't get confused by those Romanian mercenaries. It was a French legionnaire that was the head of that company. Anyway, we can speak about that in another show. So, getting back to our questions, does it help to have foreign military interventions? It can help when it's done like the Tanzanian did it. Short, efficient, with local forces, and you withdraw. You let people be. And yet, they did it in 79. Museveni only stabilized his power in 86. Right? Which means that for the first 8 years of this intervention, people could have said, hey, since the Tanzanian has invaded Uganda, maybe they left, but look at the mess we have. Right? I don't know if, I wasn't there, but I'm not sure Ugandans were all happy about that. I wouldn't say that. Zaire became DRC and the war is still there. Central African Republic is a weak state and the war is still there and they're still looking for a patron. Somalia. Is the Somalian question sorted, Irumba?
My elder, how do you say Somalia is stabilizing progressively when they're actually working towards dividing Somalia into two, Somaliland and Somalia? Is that stability? Give him the mic. Let him justify his statement. They are planning to have two Somalia, Somaliland and Somalia. That's like they have done to say South Sudan and Sudan, and so that's the solution. And they are now planning to do the same to Congo. They're saying Congo is too big.
Mr. Speaker,
but is America too small?
Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to submit, with all due respect, I want to submit that when I usually state that the problem of Africa, although Africa has got a certain percentage of contributing to her own problems, for instance, when you look at the Somalia and the Somaliland, it has not started today. This is an old question. When you look at the interests, for instance, and these are some of the non-Pan-African interests, when you look at why, for instance, Ethiopia is supporting the creation of Somaliland. Why? When you look at, for instance, the forces that among the forces that were mandated to go to and stabilize Somalia, not Somalia, Somalia. The Somalia, as a government, said that Ethiopian forces should go away. We don't want them. So you will not understand the political interests, for instance, of foreign powers at play in those circumstances. But I want to bring you closer. When you look at what was happening in Somalia, dead bodies would be littered on the streets. In Somalia and other towns, it is no longer the case. When you look at Somalia now, 10 or so years backwards, the banking sector had collapsed. It is now functional. The school or education system had completely collapsed. The school system is now very functional. Elections and democracy and political question leadership was completely down. They sorted that one out, and now we have got leaders being elected, parliamentary representatives. You know, for them it is parliamentary representation. That's how they do their thing. So when you look at things that make government, things that make a society, in Somalia, which were not there years ago, when Somalia was considered to be a failed state, with the intervention of UPDF, along with other armies that were sanctioned by the African Union, but particularly without wanting to be so proud of UPDF, I'm not a UPDF member, but I know it is my army. I can tell you that so much has been achieved in Somalia as a consequence of the intervention of UPDF and other friendly African forces under the auspices of African Union.
Okay, give him back the mic. Let him.
UPDF are an army that we've been debating whatever their missions has been done in a Pan-African way or for private reasons. I think the audience has a lot of answers to answer that now. It is also a private company. It means that at the very same time, UPDF has private interest, which is to make money, and public interest, and Pan-African interest, which is to protect the people and deploy on the agenda of Commander-in-Chief, right? I do have more questions than I have answer on this one. But I do questions, whatever the extent of UPDF becoming slowly but surely a private firm, whatever to sell armed vehicle or to sell security, like they've done, they opened a security company in 2022 where they claim it's only veteran and not UPDF soldiers that are inside. But yet, some people wonder whatever it doesn't divert the army towards its national mission, right? What does it mean for Uganda to have army entrepreneur? What does it mean for Uganda to have people that sell munitions, that sell weapons to foreign neighborhood countries? How does it enter the mission of the army? All of this is really unclear because the army is protected by different law, not by business law. However, what they're doing now is business. I do want to know what is the Ugandan army selling to the South Sudanese government. I do want to know how much money is the Ugandan army making outside of those contracts in South Sudan. I want to know if that have anything to do with the diplomatic alignments of Uganda in South Sudan. Is Uganda in South Sudan protected contract that the army has made, or is it protecting South Sudanese from civil war? As I said at the beginning of this presentation, I have more questions than I have answers. And it is highly possible that has nothing to do with that, or that what I'm talking about is a minus factor. But yet, we need to explore, we need to investigate. When they sell 80 armed vehicles to DRC, are they making a business with Tshisekedi so Tshisekedi secure Ugandan army in the east? Or are they making it for other reasons? Are we sure that when Tshisekedi pays the UPDF on his private firm, that he pays the UPDF, or does he pay individuals that have access to decisions on the east of the DRC? You know? And so those are a bit of a blurry topic. As I said earlier, I have more questions than I have answers, but what I do know is how private firms function. And they function on capitalist rules. And capitalist rules and army rules are completely different. So which one applies in DRC? Which one applies in South Sudan? Which one apply in Somalia? We want to know. We want to know. Is it only purely regional and continental interest, or is there also private economic interest? And what if tomorrow Uganda become much more powerful in selling munitions to his neighbors than he's sending his own army? What if tomorrow that business becomes so big that now Uganda has an interest into different factions? I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm not saying the leadership in place would like such things. But we don't know in 20 years, we don't know in 30 years, we don't know in 40 years, because what we know is capitalist firm cannot stop. Imperialism was based on capitalist firm that could not stop. It was based on capitalist firm that wanted to make more money because they couldn't make any more money in Europe or in America, so they came to Congo, so they came to Uganda to do more. Is that possible? This is in the DNA of imperialism. Is it possible that this business side of Ugandan army, of the UPDF, blurry the mission of UPDF itself? Is it possible that the economic interest of the army of Uganda is standing over the interest of Uganda as a country, as a nation, with its Pan-African agenda? Once again, I do not have answers for that. So if we want to debate this on the comments, on different platforms, I would really like to know. I'm just a researcher that says that there's some blurry element here, and it would be good to clarify what is the actual mission. Is it business, or is it Pan-Africanism?
Comrade Rugarama, as you wind up, if you could give a closing remark on what he has presented, whether there is something you can pinpoint.
I entirely agree with Comrade Lesaffre when he points out that in these engagements, which actually look Pan-African, there is an element of selfishness, and he also expresses fears that some people may even be on the mission of economically gaining. I want to state that that is actually true at the same time. But when it overrides the Pan-African credentials, then it will make it will make nonsense of the sense, like he was saying, zero sense. It will make nonsense of the sense in the sense that when you look at the aggression, for instance, they say Pan-Americanism. When you look at what America does in different parts of the world, they are exporting their aggression, their imperialism, their bad manners. They are creating global bases, military bases. During Obama's time, they increased it, and for the very first time, they put a military base in Ghana. I think the body of the late Osejefo, Kwame Nkrumah, must be turning in the grave. But I can assure you that when Uganda, for instance, we are lucky that we still have a revolutionary leader. Of course, he's not going to live forever. And I hope that for us, the young cadres who are about to hit the 40, the 50, we are going to carry on the mantle and be able to differentiate somebody who is carrying a candlelight in the name of Pan-Africanism, the assistance that Uganda is extending to Somalia, the training they are doing, making sure that the political question is answered, can only be described as Pan-Africanism. If there are any elements of economic gain, you know, when you are stable militarily, when there is peace, you will certainly flourish on the economic front. I want to state also that Mr. Lesaffre pointed it very well. Let me hammer it. The truth of the matter, for instance, is that the cargo transport for Uganda Airlines to Somalia has increased, and it is the best business. There is no country that is having a more lucrative cargo business than Uganda Airlines. They are the ones who are doing a lot of cargo transport, and they are making a lot of money out of that. How is that criminal? No. They stabilized the country. The point I'm making is that when we go outside our borders to stabilize the neighboring countries, it is very profitable on so many fronts. Profitable economically, profitable peace-wise, profitable otherwise. Because when you have a stable neighbor, you yourself, you are stable.
Thank you so much, my panelists. Comrade Daniel Rugarama, my elder. Comrade Rugarama is a lawyer. He's a chairman of the Pan-African Movement Uganda chapter, and my elder is also a freelance journalist, Comrade Thomas Lesaffre. Rutatina is a French journalist in Uganda here, attached to the Pan-African Pyramid Research Desk. My name is Andrew Irumba Katusabe, your speaker, and I want to thank you so much. Those of you who have been following us online, please continue to follow us online. Let the debate continue on our various platforms of social media. And don't forget to follow this show on Saturday on NBS Television, our media partner, from 4 to 5 p.m. I say now.
Free your mind now. Be part of People's Pan-African Parliament, the Pan-African Pyramid Debate with your speaker, Andrew Irumba Katusabe.